The sun had just risen over the vast fields of Texas when we arrived at Jake's ranch. In recent weeks, wild boars have been appearing with increasing frequency, tearing up large sections of pasture and regularly visiting ponds and forest edges in search of food during the night. Jake had set several traps in locations where he believed the sounders traveled most often, and today the entire team was checking the whole system. Our first stop was a trap positioned beside a small water pond in the middle of the ranch. Even from a distance, Jake could tell that the trap door had already been triggered. The ground around it was covered with fresh tracks, and the soft mud still showed clear signs of rooting after the sounder had come to drink during the night. As we moved closer, everyone was surprised by the number of wild boars inside. Clearly, the trap had been triggered at exactly the right moment, when the entire group entered in search of food. It could not have been a better start to today's inspection. We quickly completed the harvest before checking the trap's mechanism to prepare it for future use. Leaving the pond behind, we drove along a dirt road to the second trap, located beside the edge of a pine forest. Jake had expected this location to produce excellent results because he had repeatedly found wild boar tracks running along the forest edge. However, as the trap came into view, everyone immediately noticed that there were only 3 wild boars inside. Compared to the first trap, the result was rather modest. Jake examined the surrounding area and suggested that most of the sounder had probably changed its travel route during the night, or that only a small group had split off to forage. Although it did not meet expectations, we completed the harvest and continued on our way, knowing that several more traps still awaited inspection. The next trap was located a little deeper inside an area filled with bulrush. On the way there, Jake shared that this had once been one of his most productive locations, but recently its performance had become much less consistent. Sure enough, when we arrived, the team found only a single wild boar inside. Jake smiled helplessly and said that this job always has days like these. Not every trap produces a big result, and sometimes choosing the right location matters more than how the trap itself is designed. After finishing the work, he carefully inspected the entire mechanism, replenished the bait, and reset the trap, hoping that the sounder would return over the coming months. The first 3 traps had produced completely different results, but the biggest surprise was still ahead. As the truck turned into a wide clearing between 2 small woodlands, Jake suddenly slowed down and burst into laughter. Even from quite a distance, we could already see that the trap was almost completely filled with wild boars. The sight before us left everyone speechless for several seconds. This was undoubtedly the most successful trap of the day. The number of wild boars inside far exceeded anything we had expected when we left the ranch early that morning. This harvest took considerably longer because the entire team had to work together continuously to load all the animals onto the truck. Although it was physically demanding, everyone was satisfied because this was exactly the outcome Jake had hoped for after many days of monitoring the sounder travel routes. After taking a short lunch break, we continued to the 5th trap. By then, the sunlight had softened, and the shadows of the trees stretched across the fields. This trap had been placed near a trail connecting the forest with a grassy pasture, an area frequently used by wildlife toward the end of the day. As soon as we stepped out of the truck, we could already hear movement coming from ahead. Inside the trap was a fairly large group of wild boars. Our arrival immediately made the entire sounder restless, with the animals constantly moving around inside in search of escape. Jake explained that this reaction was quite common whenever they detected people approaching. The team kept a safe distance, calmly assessed the situation, and worked through each step together. Although the large number of animals required additional time, the work was finally completed just before the sun disappeared behind the rows of trees. Just when it seemed that the day's work had come to an end, Jake still wanted to stop and inspect the final trap. This was a newly installed trap placed along the forest edge, where he had repeatedly found numerous fresh tracks over the past several days. At first, we did not expect much because the trap had only recently been put into service. Yet when we arrived, the door had already closed, and what we found inside filled the entire team with excitement. After only a short time in operation, the trap had already proven highly effective and produced results beyond our expectations. It also demonstrated once again that choosing the right location often determines success more than any other factor. As darkness began to settle in, we returned to the ranch after a day with almost no time to rest. 6 traps had produced 6 completely different outcomes, ranging from traps holding only a single animal to traps so full that the team had to work continuously for hours. That is exactly what makes every inspection so intriguing and impossible to predict. No one ever knows what will be waiting in the next trap, and perhaps it is that very uncertainty that makes this work such a challenging journey every time the sun rises over the vast ranches of Texas.
Around midnight, the monitoring system sent a signal showing that the first trap had been triggered. Although she was eager to check it immediately, Patricia decided to wait until daylight to ensure safety and allow for a clearer assessment of the scene. Early the next morning, the entire team arrived at the first location. The signs on the ground showed that an entire group of hogs had moved through during the night. It partially confirmed that the travel route Patricia had been tracking for days was absolutely accurate. The workday began with high expectations. If the first trap showed that the system was working effectively, the next inspection point surprised everyone even more. Even from a considerable distance away, we could see far more movement inside the enclosure than usual. As we approached, Patricia smiled quietly. This was clearly the result she had been hoping for over the past several days. The number of hogs inside the netted enclosure far exceeded initial expectations. The team quickly divided tasks, prepared guiding lanes, and coordinated to move each group out of the enclosure in a controlled manner. The workload was heavier than expected, but everyone felt that the days of scouting and preparation had paid off. The next trap brought a different kind of challenge. The moment the hogs detected human presence, they became highly alert and continuously moved around the enclosure searching for a way out. Patricia reminded everyone to stay in position and avoid getting too close. Wild animals can react unpredictably when they feel cornered, so every action had to be carried out calmly and according to plan. The moment once again demonstrated how important field experience truly is. After two particularly busy inspection points, the fourth trap delivered a completely different result. Only a single animal was recorded inside the enclosure. Patricia did not seem disappointed. She believed it reflected the natural behavior of wild hogs. They often change group size and travel routes depending on environmental conditions. That is also why no two traps ever produce exactly the same outcome. Just as the team thought most of the work was finished, Patricia brought us to a trap located near an area where numerous juvenile tracks had previously been recorded. She hoped this location would provide more insight into how the herd had been moving in recent days. The inspection revealed multiple animals of different sizes inside the netted enclosure. The amount of work required the team to coordinate even more closely than at the previous locations. Patricia constantly communicated with everyone to ensure every step followed the plan. Although it took considerable time, it also became one of the most informative inspections regarding how the hogs travel together in groups. The final trap was recorded by the system as being activated during the night. When we arrived the following morning, Patricia was already there. She had finished inspecting the site, documenting tracks, and preparing everything for the team. Looking at the notebook filled with travel routes, appearance times, and weather conditions, we understood why she was often able to predict so accurately where the hogs would return. Behind every successful inspection lies not only the trap itself, but also countless hours of observation, record keeping, and patience in the field. A day of work alongside Patricia came to an end as the sun slowly sank over the Florida grasslands. What stayed with us most was not the number recorded at each trap, but the way she patiently followed every footprint, every trail, and every subtle environmental change. It was that patience that helped the entire team better understand the behavior of wild hogs and why every field inspection continues to bring unexpected discoveries. And perhaps that is also why we are always willing to return to Florida for another journey in the future.
The first trap was placed right near the forest edge, not far from the barn. David chose this spot because for several consecutive nights, fresh tracks had been recorded leading from the forest into the farmland. After a night of waiting, the team returned early in the morning. The moment we arrived, everyone paused for a few seconds. The result exceeded all expectations. This was the largest number recorded in recent checks. David could only smile and shake his head, not expecting that such a location so close to the barn could attract an entire group passing through in a single night. If it was just a coincidence, the next checkpoints would quickly provide the answer. So we continued along the forest edge, where narrow trails still clearly showed signs from the previous night. The second trap was set along the forest boundary, where dense bushes formed a natural corridor. Upon inspection, the results once again confirmed that David's choice of location was well-founded. Fresh signs around the area indicated that the wild boar herd was still maintaining its familiar travel route through this corridor. This made the team even more certain that more surprises were waiting ahead. The next checkpoint was located in an open clearing within the pine forest, about 400 meters from the ranch. At first glance, the area seemed quiet, but as we moved closer, signs of wild boar activity became increasingly intense. This inspection surprised the entire team, not only because of the number recorded, but also due to the size of some individuals. David shared that he had passed through this area many times without realizing it was actually one of the most active zones. The next trap was placed in the oak forest south of the ranch. This area had previously shown many fresh tracks, so everyone expected similar results to the earlier locations. However, the reality was completely different. Wild boar activity in this zone seemed to have changed overnight. This difference highlighted how unpredictable wildlife movement patterns can be. Leaving the oak forest, David decided to take us to a place he himself had once doubted, the large horse grazing pasture right inside the ranch. He had always assumed wild boars would avoid areas with heavy human and animal presence, but what happened next completely changed that assumption. Wide grass fields with freely grazing horses created a calm and peaceful scene. It was hard to imagine wild boars regularly appearing here. A trap had been carefully placed along a movement route near the pasture. The next morning, the result confirmed what David had already observed several times before. The presence of horses did not seem to discourage wild boars from maintaining their nighttime feeding habits. It was a fascinating discovery about their ability to adapt to surrounding environments. The final checkpoint was also located within the horse ranch area. This time, everything had been prepared carefully, from trap placement to a camera monitoring system. That night, the signal showed the trap had been triggered as expected. However, upon returning to check, the team discovered that the camera had been damaged after an unexpected impact, most likely caused by horses moving through the area. As a result, we were unable to capture the full sequence as planned. Despite the missing footage, the evidence still showed a highly active night of wild boar movement around the grazing area. It was also a reminder that in field work, equipment does not always function as intended. The day of inspection ended with many memorable findings. From forest edges, pine woods, oak forest to horse pastures, each location showed how highly adaptable wild boars are to their environment. Sometimes, the places that seem quiet and least likely to show activity turn out to be the most surprising. And for David, The journey to understand their movement patterns will certainly continue in the days ahead. After the previous trapping attempts, I realized the wild boars in this area had started changing the way they reacted. They were beginning to avoid the familiar types of traps. The tracks they left behind showed that they were moving more cautiously, stopping for longer periods before moving in. That forced me to change my approach. This time, I chose to use steel cage traps, stronger, more enclosed, and especially suitable for holding large, aggressive wild boars. With this type of trap, once they stepped into the right position, the chance of escape was almost gone. The first steel cage trap was placed directly along a familiar trail where wild boar tracks appeared heavily concentrated. After securing the trap and scattering bait inside, I left before nightfall. Once darkness came, a wild boar entered and triggered the trap. The moment the door slammed shut, it immediately panicked, violently crashing into the steel bars and desperately trying to escape in vain. By the next morning, when I returned, the noise from inside could already be heard from a distance. The wild boar still had not stopped moving, reacting aggressively every time I stepped closer. After bringing the situation under control, I secured it inside the trap and prepared to transport it away, ending the first trap exactly as planned. The next cage trap was placed on the western side of the forest, but from the beginning I knew things would not be as simple as the previous attempt. This area showed clear signs that the wild boars had become more alert. As night fell, the camera captured one approaching the trap, stopping for a long time at the entrance, sniffing, then backing away, repeating the behavior several times as if carefully inspecting every detail. It took a long time before it finally decided to move deeper inside. And then, in a single moment of lost caution, the trap door slammed shut. This reaction was far more violent. The wild boar repeatedly charged into the steel frame, each impact powerful enough to shake the entire cage in the middle of the quiet night. By the following morning, when I returned, it still had not calmed down. Every step I took closer caused it to react even more aggressively, thrashing wildly inside the confined space. Clearly, this was no longer an easy capture, but the trap had held it long enough for me to complete the control process. The third trap was placed directly inside a cattle farm area, a far more sensitive location than the previous ones. The tracks showed that this wild boar had already moved deep into the property, and allowing it to continue roaming freely could create serious risks. The trap had been set since the day before, and when I arrived to inspect it, inside was a fully grown wild boar, large in size and extremely aggressive. The moment I approached, it reacted violently, moving frantically and repeatedly slamming into the steel bars as if trying to destroy everything to escape. Unlike the earlier captures, this time I did not approach directly. A secure tunnel system had already been installed, connecting the trapdoor directly to the back of a pickup truck. Step by step, we guided the wild boar through the narrow passage. With its movement restricted and no other escape route available, it was forced to move forward. And within only a few minutes, the wild boar had been loaded directly onto the truck, completing the operation safely and under control. This time, the trap was placed deep inside a dense forest, an area where tracks showed that this wild boar had been active for quite some time. As I approached, the atmosphere immediately became tense. Inside the steel cage was a large wild boar, its eyes alert and its reactions extremely aggressive. Every step I took forward caused it to slam violently into the trap, producing heavy, repeated impacts through the silence around us. I stopped at a safe distance. No rushing, no creating additional pressure. After assessing the situation, I carried out a humane handling procedure according to protocol, ending the situation quickly and under control. The final cage trap produced a completely different result. As I moved closer to inspect it, I quickly realized there were no large adults inside like in the previous traps. Instead, the entire cage was filled with juvenile wild boars. They crowded together inside the confined space, panicking but lacking the strength to break through the trap structure. The sight genuinely surprised me, not because of the number, but because of what it revealed. The wild boar population in this area was not only large, but growing extremely fast. And if left uncontrolled, these young boars would soon become much larger and far more dangerous adults in the future. When all the locations had finally been checked, I stood still and looked over the entire area one last time. This operation revealed something very clearly. It was not only about numbers, but about an entire breeding cycle actively expanding. From aggressive adults to newly grown juveniles, everything was increasing faster than I had expected. We managed to bring part of it under control, but this is definitely not the end. I decided to set a total of 5 traps, and the first one was placed in an open clearing deep in the woods, an area covered with fresh signs of wild boar activity. After finishing the setup and spreading bait, I left to continue placing the remaining traps in other locations. The work lasted for hours, but throughout the entire process, I couldn't stop thinking about that first trap, wondering whether it would actually work as planned. When I finally returned, I could already tell from quite a distance that something had happened. The silence that normally covered the area was now broken by loud, chaotic noises coming from the direction of the trap. And as I got closer, the sight in front of me genuinely caught me off guard. Inside the trap, an entire group of aggressive wild boars had been captured. They shoved against one another, moving wildly in panic. But no matter how violently they reacted, they still couldn't escape. The second trap had been placed right beside the forest edge. After checking the first trap, I could barely wait any longer and immediately headed toward the second location. The moment I got close, I realized something was wrong. The wire mesh surrounding the trap was shaking violently in the stillness of the forest. As I moved closer, the scene became clear. A pair of wild boars was trapped inside, thrashing around desperately while trying to escape. They slammed repeatedly into the fencing, spinning around inside the confined space and creating sharp, tense bursts of noise. But despite how aggressively they reacted, the trap continued to hold them firmly inside. That day had already been more than enough, so we decided to stop and leave the remaining traps unchecked until the following morning. As darkness fell, wild boars slowly began emerging from the woods, following the scent of bait into the traps through the silence of the night. When we returned the next morning, I almost froze at the sight in front of me. The number inside had increased dramatically. It was no longer just a handful of boars like before. Now there were dozens packed tightly together inside the confined space. They moved chaotically, creating relentless crashing sounds that made the atmosphere feel more intense than ever. Another trap showed clear signs that a large number of boars had entered during the night. The tracks and damage left inside proved that the original group had been much bigger. But when we checked the trap the next morning, the scene was completely different. Only 7 boars remained inside. It was obvious that most of them had escaped. The signs around the area showed that they had actually leaped over the fencing to break free, something I never expected them to do so easily. That alone proved these wild boars were not only numerous, but also incredibly strong and extremely reckless. The final trap turned out to be the biggest surprise of all. It had been placed in the middle of an exposed clearing, a location where I honestly didn't expect much because there was almost no natural cover around it. But when we checked it, the result was the complete opposite of what I anticipated. Inside was an entire herd of wild boars, both fully grown adults and smaller juveniles, crowded tightly together inside the trap. Clearly, they had let their guard down in a way I never expected, and that was exactly what turned this trap into one of the most successful locations of the entire operation. After finishing the inspection of every trap, I stood still for a moment and looked back across the vast area surrounding us. This time, the results went far beyond my expectations, not only because of the numbers, but because of how the wild boars were adapting and reacting. Some traps worked perfectly, but other situations revealed something far more concerning. The boars were becoming bolder, more unpredictable, and much harder to control. And that made me realize one thing clearly. Even though we achieved results today, this confrontation is far from over. At first light, the sun rose over the dew-covered grasslands of Florida as Carter and I set out to inspect the trap systems positioned around the farm. After the overnight rain, the air carried the scent of damp soil and decaying leaves, while countless fresh tracks pressed into the muddy ground revealed that the area had been bustling with activity throughout the night. Before heading out, I expected this to be just another routine inspection. But after only a few stops, the emotions of our team shifted repeatedly from surprise to concern and then back to hope. The first trap was located beside a grassy field near the cattle pasture. Even from a distance, I could tell the trap had been triggered. As we approached, the scene before us made me stop in my tracks. Inside was a group of wild boars much larger than we had anticipated. They moved constantly, their noise echoing through the otherwise quiet morning. What struck me most wasn't just their numbers, it was how close they had come to the grazing cattle. At that moment, I understood why local farmers spend so much time monitoring their movements. After completing the farm's standard management procedures, we continued on to the second inspection site. The next trap was positioned along the edge of a pine forest. Numerous narrow game trails led from the woods into the open pasture, making this a well-known travel corridor for wildlife. During the inspection, we found an entire sounder of wild boars of various sizes. Looking at the overlapping tracks pressed into the damp sand, I realized this group had likely been traveling together for several days. It was satisfying to see that our prediction about their route had been accurate, but also made me think about how quickly they were expanding their range around the farm. Our third stop brought an entirely different feeling. At first, I was disappointed because there appeared to be very little activity compared to what we had expected. But after taking a closer look, we discovered evidence of one exceptionally large boar. The deep footprints alone showed how powerful the animal must have been. I remember telling Carter that numbers don't always tell the whole story. A single large boar can cause significant damage to pasture land and fencing if it repeatedly returns to the same area. That realization quickly replaced my initial disappointment with renewed focus. The fourth trap had also been triggered, but this time only a single boar had been recorded. What caught my attention were the repeated impact marks along the steel frame, suggesting it had spent hours trying to escape. Standing beside the trap, I realized our job wasn't simply about checking equipment. Every inspection also gave us an opportunity to evaluate whether the system was still working effectively under current conditions, allowing adjustments that could reduce risks for both the farm and wildlife. At the fifth inspection point, I found myself disappointed once again. There was very little new activity to report. Looking only at this result, many people might have considered the day unsuccessful. But Carter reminded me that wildlife management often has days like this. Weather conditions, food availability, and changing water levels in nearby wetlands can alter a wild boar's travel routes overnight. The important thing is to keep monitoring and learn those patterns, rather than judging everything from a single inspection. As the sun disappeared behind the rows of pine trees, we arrived at our final stop of the day. The headlights from the pickup truck swept across the open field, revealing another area that had experienced heavy wild boar activity during the previous night. The exhaustion we'd all been feeling seemed to disappear instantly. After two relatively quiet inspection sites, the final location reminded us that the overall picture is always more important than any single checkpoint. On the drive back, I looked over the map marked with each inspection site and realized something important. The most memorable part of the day wasn't which location recorded more activity or less. It was the way every single stop told us another piece of the story about the constantly changing movements of wild boars across the Florida landscape. Those stories give farmers valuable information to better protect their land, while reminding us that nature is always far more complex than what can be understood from a single day's inspection. Without wasting a second, we quickly loaded our gear into the pickup truck and hit the gas straight toward the area, calling for help. The damage was exposed right at the edge of the field. A wild boar was trapped inside the agricultural fencing net. Even with its leg tightly pinned and no way to retreat, the animal showed no sign of panic. Instead, it became extremely aggressive, charging wildly and trying to attack anyone who dared step too close. Ordinary farm fencing was never designed to withstand the raw power of an animal like this. Clearly, the farmer's passive barrier method had completely failed. To eliminate this threat for good, we had no choice but to intervene with a professional trapping system. Following the freshly torn up soil from the bean field leading straight into the open spaces near the forest edge, we quickly identified the herd's main travel route. The trap network was immediately set up based on their feeding habits. The next morning, the sky cleared and sunlight broke through. My heartbeat picked up as I walked closer to the forest edge to check the results from the night before. Inside the first one-way drop gate trap stood a massive boar, nearly 5 feet long, weighing close to 330 pounds, and estimated to be around 6 to 7 years old. The bristles along its back stood up like a warning the moment it saw us. We kept waiting until nightfall. Silence swallowed everything around us. At the exact same trap location from that morning, the scent strategy had worked perfectly, catching the smell of their own kind and the bait. The wild boars slowly moved into the area. One by one, they slipped through the angled one-way drop gate of the steel trap. The mechanism was simple, but brutally effective. Once the gate dropped, every push they made only forced the edge deeper into the ground. No gap, no escape. The moment they realized they were trapped, the entire group exploded into chaos. Heavy muscle slammed violently against steel, creating a brutal chain of metallic crashes. But the reinforced steel frame held firm, and the outcome was sealed within minutes. But we weren't done yet. Holding our breath, we shifted our focus to another trap location. A lone dark figure slowly approached. It confidently stepped all the way inside and began feeding calmly, completely unaware of the deadly mechanism hidden beneath its feet. Just one light touch. The vertical steel door dropped. The sharp metallic slam echoed through the night. Startled, the animal jumped back and rammed hard against the cage wall. It spun violently, growling with rage inside the tight steel space. But the mechanical lock had already snapped shut. There would be no second chance. While we were still watching that animal, the monitoring system signaled another promising alert from a nearby area. At the second one-way drop gate trap, another one had already been caught. Spreading multiple traps along the predicted travel routes that night helped us completely shut down the herd's destruction. As the first light of dawn appeared, it was time for the final and most dangerous part of the operation, safely removing these wild animals from the area. I carefully backed the truck right up to the trap entrance. Using heavy-duty ratchet straps and thick ropes, we tightly secured the transport cage to the trap gate. Moving the boars required extreme patience. The use of electric prodding equipment had to be calculated with absolute precision. At the right moment, one light touch would create enough momentum for the animal to leap forward into the transport cage. At the wrong moment, it would spin back and charge straight into the steel barrier, separating it from the handler. Every movement had to be decisive. No rushing, no hesitation. The entire destructive sounder was successfully removed. The farm stayed peaceful for a while, but silence is never permanent with animals like these. When the cold winds arrive and the ground is covered with dry autumn leaves, we know food becomes scarce, and that scarcity will force them back. But whenever they return, our system will be ready. Catching wild boars has never been about luck. It is detailed calculation, from wind direction to scent control. We will continue holding the line in these forests to keep the area safe. Without wasting time, we completed the first net trap that same day on the southern edge of the forest. Before long, it gave its first signal. One boar had been caught inside, but instead of staying contained, it reacted violently, charging straight into the netted gate again and again. The mesh stretched tight, shaking wildly with every impact. The decision was made immediately after that. We would not dismantle the old trap, but we would no longer rely on this type of system. At once, on the northern side of the forest, where the terrain was tighter and more enclosed, a different setup was built. A steel door trap, heavier frame, stronger locks, a gravity drop gate that did not depend on tension like netting. It only needed to be strong enough to withstand a direct hit from a herd of wild boars. When everything was ready, we waited in silence for nightfall. The tension in the air was so thick that no one said a word. Then the first movement appeared. The smell of bait quickly drew in the herd. And when the moment came, when every last one had stepped inside, click, the trigger was activated. The gate dropped shut. Inside, several boars reacted instantly. They burst into frantic motion, searching for an escape. But every direction was sealed. Metal rang out in sharp beats. Short, clean, final. We looked at one another. For the first time, the trap had worked exactly as intended. At another point near the forest edge, the reinforced trap set by Tom did not take long to activate either. Though it caught only a few, it would still reduce the damage to this season's crops for the local farmers. Once the trap was sprung, the boars tried to escape by instinct. But that was impossible. They had been fully contained inside the solid structure we had spent so much effort preparing. And did not stop there. Texas is home to more than 3 million feral hogs. So together with landowners, we often place traps like these out in the fields. The trap in this area became another hotspot, stirring up noise at the edge of the woods. When large, powerful boars were found contained inside, it proved one thing clearly. The system was working exactly as we had planned. Every time a trap was triggered, we did not rush to celebrate. But at the very least, everyone felt a little more at ease. The traps continued to be reinforced. We continued the control operation. This time, we were determined to catch every last one, to leave them no chance to damage this area again. Every year, our state of Texas alone suffers around $400, $500 million in economic losses caused by wild hogs. This final night was considered the decisive one. Once again, we took our positions, held our breath, and waited. At the first trap, the herd had grown larger. Not only adults, but smaller ones as well entered the enclosure. The space inside began to tighten. Then, at the perfect moment, the trap let out a chilling clack. Instantly, movement inside became faster, more violent, more desperate. Heavy blows slammed into the steel frame. Metal rang out sharply. Others circled and shoved. The entire trap shook in waves. But this time, just like the night before, not a single one escaped. We kept watching, kept waiting, and then everything reached its peak. A massive herd appeared, not scattered individuals anymore, but a dense, moving flood. They fed greedily on the bait scattered across the ground until BM, the gate crashed down. At once, the trap exploded with noise inside. Feet pounding the dirt, steel bars rattling without pause. And in that moment, we understood more clearly than ever. If the trap system had not been strong enough, everything would have burst apart. The next morning, we did not dismantle the trap right away, because we knew there was still more out there. And we were right. Another large herd had been caught just before dawn. When we walked past, they became even more agitated. Several slammed into the steel frame so hard the entire trap shook repeatedly. And do you know what was inside that cage? The very reason those fields have been destroyed for weeks. As everything gradually came under control, the farm grew quiet again. No more fresh tracks each morning. No more furrows torn open after every night. This was not a hunt. This was the only way to save the harvest. Because once wild boars discover a stable food source, they do not stop on their own. In situations like this, what do you think matters more? A trap strong enough, or the patience to wait for the perfect moment? Leave your thoughts below.
In the first test, the trap was set with full confidence. The sounder moved in smoothly. Everything looked right. For a moment, the plan seemed solid. Then, the problem appeared. The gate didn't drop evenly. The response was slower than expected. Just a small delay, and the entire system lost its effect. The hogs slipped out with little resistance. This failure wasn't because the hogs were too smart. It was because the human mechanism wasn't precise enough. In wildlife management, a minor error is all it takes to collapse an entire control strategy. After the initial setback, a familiar solution was deployed. Figure 6 hop trap, a design that had worked well in other locations. But this time, the outcome was different. The hogs approached more slowly. They moved cautiously, scanning their surroundings and reacting clearly to small irregularities. There was no blind rush. Instinct had been replaced by evaluation. When behavior changes, old solutions lose their edge very quickly. At this point, the strategy shifted. Instead of trying to capture the entire sounder, the focus moved to redesigning and testing drop traps for individual hogs. The goal was no longer numbers, it was behavioral precision. The trap was lower, the response was faster, and most importantly, the sense of pressure during entry was minimized. This is a principle widely used in modern wildlife management. Small, precise interventions instead of large, high-risk actions. At this stage, hogs proved they weren't easily fooled. The issue was no longer hog behavior, it was how the trap communicated with them. The decisive shift came with the full adoption of one-way doors. Hogs could enter naturally, without feeling blocked or forced, but when they turned back, the door's mechanics made exit increasingly difficult. This system works with natural behavior rather than against it, reducing stress and unnecessary risk.
Well, good news is they definitely some old foul hogs. Put one of them on the grill. Yeah. You can't be doing all that. Shame on you.
This time, the problem wasn't a mechanical failure, it was a false signal. Noise, vibration, and irregular movement sent the wrong message. This place isn't safe. The fix focused on hinge alignment, smoother motion, and sound reduction. Once corrected, the door stopped drawing attention. It became a natural part of the path. The final variable to refine was timing. Choosing the right moment became critical. With the introduction of remotely activated smart gate systems, human presence was no longer required on site. Here, technology wasn't used to apply force, but to reduce human visibility, lower stress, and minimize risk on both sides. This time, the trap functioned exactly as it was designed to. After repeated failures, adjustments, and trials, success didn't come from luck. It came from patience and a willingness to learn. When intelligence is placed above instinct, humans don't just protect their crops. They build a sustainable control method, capable of long-term use in modern wildlife management.